So Andrew Neil is a host on the BBC, and he talked to Ben Shapiro about his new book, and things went haywire here. So the original interview is 16 minutes long. I don't have time to show you the whole thing here and now, but I'm going to show you as much of it as I possibly can. I think it's about 8 minutes or so, so about half the interview. It's the more interesting parts. Let's watch. Then we'll come back and discuss.
I'm interested that you think there's a thought movement inside the Republican Party. I mean, haven't the Conservatives run out of ideas in America? All the new policies, the Medicare for all, $15 minimum wage, the Green New Deal, they're all coming from the left, and they're popular.
Well, frankly, I'm confused by the idea that any of those are particularly new ideas. I mean, most of those ideas have been around since Franklin Delano Roosevelt at the very earliest, or at the very latest, rather. Some of them go all the way back to Woodrow Wilson. But the idea that new ideas are absent in the Republican Party is obviously untrue. We have a very strong debate that goes on inside sort of the conservative halls of intelligentsia about what is the appropriate action to take with regard to the medical system. Should global warming be considered a real threat, or should global warming be considered something that technology will solve? And if so, what are the best aspects of solving that? Now, there's a rich intellectual debate on the right about nationalism versus patriotism, for example, or populism versus free marketeerism. That debate is happening on the right to sort of suggest that the right in America is bereft of ideas, but the left is full of ideas. Number one, not all ideas are good ideas. I mean, AOC is pretty good evidence of that. I'm a big fan of some old ideas myself that I think are pretty good. But beyond that, I think that it is intellectual sneering of the highest order to suggest that only the left has new and decent ideas.
Some of the ideas that are popular in your side of politics would seem to take us back to the Dark Ages. Georgia, new abortion laws, which you are much in favor of, that a woman who miscarries could get 30 years. A Georgian woman who travels to another state for an abortion procedure could get 10 years. These are extreme hard policies.
Well, okay, a couple of things. One, I'm not sure. I mean, frankly, I don't know whether are you an objective journalist or are you an opinion journalist?
I'm a journalist that asks questions. Okay,
so you're a supposedly objective journalist calling policies with which you disagree barbaric and suggesting only one side of the political aisle has ideas. So I just want to point out that I wish you would at least be honest in your own biases.
Mr. Shapiro, I know that broadcasting in America is now so polarized that on one program you only have the left and another one you just have the right. My job is to question those who have strong views and put an alternative to them. If you were an anti-abortion person, I would be putting pro-abortion questions to you. But you are
really would you call the pro-choice position?
So why don't you just answer my question,
sir? I'm happy to answer your question. Please answer this one. Would you suggest that a late-term abortion is brutal?
I'm not taking a view on this issue. I'm asking you the questions.
Sir, you just suggested that the pro-life position is inherently brutal and terrible, so I'm asking you, as an objective journalist, would you ask the same question to a pro-choice advocate by calling their position brutal and horrible?
What I'm asking you is that why is it that a bill banning abortions after a woman has been pregnant for 6 weeks is not a return to the Dark Ages? What's your answer?
My answer is something called science. Human life exists at conception. It ought to be protected. Now, back to my question to you. You purport to be an objective journalist. BBC purports to be an objective down-the-middle network. It obviously is not. It never has been. And you as a journalist are proceeding to call one side of the political aisle ignorant, barbaric, and sending us back to the Dark Ages. Why don't you just say that you're on the left? Is this so hard for you? Why can't you just be honest? Seriously, it's a serious question.
Mr. Shapiro, if you only knew how ridiculous that statement is, you wouldn't have said it. Again, it was your description of the State of the Union address in 2012 as fascist.
The wording of President Trump's 2012 address was bad and wrong.
That's all. There are plenty of things that are bad and wrong, but it doesn't make them fascist.
Well, I suppose that's true. But if you would like to, again, if you'd like to read me the column out loud, I suppose I can critique it for you.
Oh, well, again, with Mr. Obama, you said, and you're Jewish yourself. I only mention that because to put this in context. The Jews who vote for Obama are, by and large, Jews in name only. Ginos, you call them.
My statement was based on the fact that Jews in the United States, as an ethnic group, are largely irreligious, which is true by Every single poll. Jews are the most irreligious group in the United States. As an Orthodox Jew who actually takes Judaism seriously, the point that I am making is that most Jews who are ethnically Jewish are not religiously Jewish in any context.
No. The point you were making is that Jews who vote for Obama are Jews in name only.
I said that, yes, that is correct. That Jews who voted for Barack Obama, a progenitor of the Iran deal, a person who was cracking down on religious liberty, a person who spent much of his career as president of the United States attempting to deprive Israel of the necessities to defend itself, that people, Jews who voted for President Obama, by and large, cared about Judaism far less than they did about other priorities.
Did you said they should turn their badge in as a Jew?
Yes, I believe that if you are somebody who takes Judaism seriously, that comes along with ideological commitment.
I mean, I guess.
Also, I hope you're having fun, by the way, going through every old tweet that I've ever sent to try and do gotcha questions. But if you'd like to have a discussion about my general philosophy or things I've done in, say, I don't know, that was 2012, so it's now 2019. If you'd like to discuss something I've done in, say, like the past 5 years, why don't we do that? How about that?
Because your book is a criticism of how angry America is and how America has to do better. And I'm simply
I have an entire list on my website, sir. On my list, I have an entire website of dumb, bad things that I've said. I'm simply trying to point out some of the things you've said that seem to me to help to stoke that anger. For example, you said Israelis like to build, Arabs like to bomb crap and live in open sewage. Well, as I say in an article entitled, "Here's a list of all the giant, bad, dumb things I've ever said."
Was that dumb?
What? Yes, that's a dumb tweet. And not only, but it is also important to mention that the next few tweets clarify that that tweet is specifically referring to the Hamas leadership, which, by the way, a BBC I've seen is relatively reticent to condemn.
No, actually, it wasn't. What you went on to do and say, you are correct about the slur on Arabs. It's not all Arabs that want to live in open sewage and blow things up. It's just Palestinians. You went on to say.
It says the ones who take sides against Israel in the Israel-Palestinian conflict.
Population is rotten to the core, you went on to say. Not Hamas, the Palestinian Arab population.
I say that by poll numbers, they elected Hamas. They educate their children in school that Israel should be obliterated, sir.
I guess.
If you want to read, honestly, this is a giant waste of time, in the sense that the entire interview is designed for you to shout slogans or old things that I've said at me. I don't see how this forwards the debate. You talk about undermining the public discourse. It seems to me that simply going through and finding lone things that sound bad out of context and then hitting people with them is a way for you to make a quick buck on BBC off the fact that I'm popular and no one has ever heard of you.
There are not many bucks to be made on the BBC, unlike American broadcasting, Mr. Shapiro. The point I'm trying to make is that your words are hardly designed to produce the consensus and understanding that the book seems to want to produce. That's my point, that you write about, Judeo-Christian culture and so on, but so much of what you've said in the past would seem to turn its back on Judeo-Christian culture.
You're lecturing me on Judeo-Christian culture after you call the pro-life position barbaric?
I just asked you a question.
And I asked you a question. You failed to answer a single one of mine. Frankly, I find this whole thing a waste of time. If you want to read the book and critique the book, why don't you read and critique the book? If you want to critique me, you can think whatever you want of me.
Why don't you
frankly,
just try and
I don't care. I don't frankly give a damn what you think of me, since I've never heard of you.
And I've never heard of you until I briefed myself for this. But that's not the issue. You have a new book out.
Then why the hell are you interviewing me, sir?
It's an interesting book. But my point is, your book claims that
society... Well, it'd be nice if you would quote it from time to time.
Your book is... Well, actually, I've done so several times, and I'm about to do so again, if you would let me just finish the question. Your book claims that society is turning its back on Judeo-Christian values.
Yeah,
what are those values? What are the values it's turning its back on?
I'm not inclined to continue an interview with a person as badly motivated as you as an interviewer. So I think we're done here. I appreciate your time, sir.
All right.
Well,
thank you for your time and for showing that anger is not part of American political discourse. Now, Mr. Shapiro, we'll say goodbye.
Hot diggity damn, son. Hot diggity damn. Oh, my goodness. Oh, there's so much to say about this. Ben Shapiro and many others on the right, they say over and over, like, me, bro, I'm just all about this battle of ideas. And I just want to have the discussion with people. You know, let's duke it out in the battle of ideas and may the best ideas win. Well, Ben, here's a perfect example of having an opportunity to have your battle of ideas. And then you run away from it and you look for a safe space because you're a snowflake and you can't actually defend your ideas when you get solid pushback on them. Listen, if you watched that interview and you thought that there were gotcha questions in there, you got to take the partisan blinders off, man. Because Ben Shapiro was literally being given a giant platform to respond. Everything Andrew Neil is putting to him, he can respond to. Dude, you have the floor. Go. You can say whatever you want to say to fight back against what you think are points that you don't like that he's making. That is the battle of ideas. That's exactly what the battle of ideas is. That's exactly what it's supposed to be. He's asking standard adversarial questions because that's how it works in the rest of the world. Only in the US do they coddle your fucking ballsack and act like you're special. Okay? In the rest of the world, there's a tradition in UK media of, yeah, I'm going to ask you tough questions because I'm in the fucking media. And what's the point? What's the point of me talking to you and holding your hands and frolicking in the meadow and singing Kumbaya to you? No, I'm going to ask you tough questions. Guess what you're supposed to do when you're a fucking journalist, when you're a reporter. Now, the even more important point is, Andrew Neil is a massive, massive right-wing guy. So Ben Shapiro calls him a leftist. Andrew Neil, the best line in the whole thing is, Mr. Shapiro, if you only knew how ridiculous that comment was, you wouldn't have said it. Andrew Neil pushed for the wars in both Iraq and Afghanistan. He argued that climate change isn't real. He's a massive right-wing guy. But because he asked adversarial questions, Ben Shapiro turned into a snowflake and melted live on air. And it was triggered and ran out looking for his safe space. So, the same thing that Ben Shapiro accuses the left of being, he actually embodies it. And you know who did a great segment on this? TJ Kirk, the amazing atheist. He broke down, this is from a while ago, he broke down a Shapiro speech, and Shapiro was giving his, like, tips on how to, you know, destroy leftists in debate. But everything that he was giving was like snide debate tricks to like weasel your way through a debate and not give direct answers, not be honest and upfront and straightforward and actually confront ideas head on. It was all like, hey, here's a way you can get away with not actually giving any answer to it and projecting and personally attacking your opponent. So the same shit he accuses the left of doing, that's what he does, and he just did it right here, and it was fucking embarrassing to watch, man. That was really hard to watch. So, notice how he said it at least twice. He alluded to the fact that, I'm popular, nobody even knows who you are. Who cares? How the fuck is that even relevant? How is that relevant? Again, that's something where if a lefty did it to a right-wing guy, he would have a meltdown and say, see, shows how bankrupt their ideas are. They can't even engage on the idea. They have to resort to personal attacks. That's a personal attack. You know, I'm popular. Nobody knows who you are. And by the way, that's not even true. In the UK, Andrew Neil is very well known. But, oh God, he's so smug. So smug and so disingenuous. And he just obfuscates throughout the entire interview. Now, let's go through some of the more specific points here. At the beginning, they talk about how Ben Shapiro's arguing there's a giant thought movement on the right, and on the left, there's nothing. And what Andrew Neil does is he says, well, listen, here are the detailed policy discussions that they're having on the left. Agree with it or disagree with it, you can't say they're not having the discussion, because we are on the left having this discussion. And he accurately brings up Green New Deal, $15 minimum wage, Medicare for all. Like, again, agree or disagree with those policies, that's irrelevant. We are having this important discussion on the left, and it is policy-focused. And Shapiro smugly acts like, other side bad, my side good. We're talking about the real ideas on my side. Now, in reality, what ideas are they talking about on the right? Deregulation, tax cuts for the rich. This is the standard go-to, you know, anti-immigrant rhetoric. And what are the things that Shapiro brings up to say the right is having all the ideas and having all the substantive discussions? He said, what action we should take with our medical system? What? That's a discussion that's being had on the right? No, your answer is less government always and more free market. That's always your answer. That's it. That's your whole answer. Trump Care, did you know that Trump Care, that was the Republican Obamacare replacement bill, it was polling at 12%? Because the whole idea is, hey, let's gut all the regulations on the for-profit health insurance companies, and let's let them do whatever the fuck they want. Yeah, we know that's your idea. That's your idea on every issue. Leave it to the free market and let them get away with whatever the fuck they want to get away with, and let's do less regulation. That's your whole approach. So when you say we're having a debate as to what action to take with the medical system, there's no debate. On the left, there's a debate. There's a debate between, public option. There's a debate between expanding Medicare, lowering the age to 55, expanding Medicaid, doing Medicare for all, doing Medicare for all where it's a single-payer system where it's public dollars, so tax money funding public institutions, or it's public money funding private institutions. So there is a vibrant debate on the left. On the right, the answer is the same, and it's always been the same, and every bill has shown this. Now, back in the 90s, there was debate on the right on the issue of healthcare, and the right-wing position was Obamacare, an individual mandate system, where you mandate people by law go buy private health insurance. But now you've abandoned that position because Obama took the position, so now you pretend like it's socialist or Marxist or whatever bullshit, and you say, no, the answer is just get rid of the lines around the states and fucking free market. That's always the answer, even though it's not even an answer, and we had that system beforehand, and it objectively had the worst possible health outcomes and the most expensive prices. So you're not saying anything. What debate are we having on the right? The battle of ideas? What to do with our medical system? Notice he didn't even say any policy. He didn't say any policies. He just said what to do with our medical system. That's not an answer. Then he says, and we're debating climate change. What? Whether or not it's a real problem and whether or not technology will save us. I got news for you, Ben. That conversation does not make you guys look intelligent. Quite the opposite. When you have, a meta-analysis done that shows 99.9% of all the studies on the issue of climate change say it's real and it's largely man-made, and you guys are still debating whether or not it's happening, that doesn't make you look good. That makes you look really, really, really shitty. And then the only thing he said where there's actually a discussion about this on the right is populism versus free markets. So basically populism versus outsourcing, or protectionism versus outsourcing to be more specific. But really that discussion is only being had along the margins. But that is a discussion that's at least happening. Ben Shapiro and Tucker Carlson had that conversation, basically free market versus protectionism or populism. And that's the one area where he made sense. But outside of that, in every other area, the vibrant policy debate and the battle of ideas is happening on the left. Then, this part says a lot to me about Ben Shapiro because he's posed a question about locking up women for abortion, and which, by the way, is a new level of extremism that we haven't seen before. The pro-life movement in the past, they always drew a line and said, no, we're not talking about locking up a woman ever for this. So they were against abortion, but they would never take that step where they want to punish, a mother as if it's murder or something. Well, that's what these new bills popping up around the country are doing. And so Andrew Neil, again, not letting his own personal opinion get in the way at all, saying it doesn't matter what my views are, I'm playing the role of reporter or journalist, so I'm going to be adversarial. He says, well, listen, that is extreme and that is barbaric. You're going to lock a woman up for 30 years if she has an abortion after 6 weeks? By the way, you know when viability is and when the nervous system is developed in the fetus? About 20 weeks, 20 to 23 weeks. 6 weeks is super early. Super early. You're going to lock them up, they have an abortion at 7 weeks? That's crazy. That is barbaric. That is rolling back the clock, generations, if that. I don't even know if they locked people up back in the day for that. So he poses that, and what does Shapiro do? He immediately deflects. Now, somebody who's intellectually honest would do what? He would answer the question. He would say, listen, I'm anti-abortion, but here's why I disagree with that particular policy. There's an intellectual tradition of being anti-abortion, but not punishing the mother in such draconian ways. He could have said that, or he could have even defended the policy if he wanted to. Hey, I think it's murder, so since it's murder, yes, that's how you treat murders. He could have answered the question, but he chose not to answer the question. He chose to deflect. He deflected, accused Andrew Neil of being a leftist and supporting abortion, even though who knows what Andrew Neil's position on abortion is. And his other positions are right-wing, so if anything, I'm inclined to believe maybe his position is right-wing, though I don't know. And then his only answer, when he actually got around to finally answering a little bit, even if you could call it that, was an aside where he said, my answer is something called science. Oh, come on, man. If you're somebody who's a Ben Shapiro fan, you don't see how flippant and glib that is? You don't see how smug that is? You don't see how he's doing everything he can to not answer the question simply because he views it as a hostile question? Son, why not be intellectually honest and upfront? There's nothing, you can just be intellectually honest and upfront. Instead, you're doing everything but that. Listen, it's like, I brought this up before, but you know what this reminded me of? Because Andrew Neil asked a lot of incisive, hard-hitting questions. When I was on Fox News, I think it was the second time, the host actually hit me with a great question at one point. Because I was citing, earlier in the interview, I was citing polls and saying, hey, listen, Americans are with the so-called far left when it comes to Medicare for all, when it comes to free college, when it comes to a living wage. And I went down the policy platform and said, Americans are with us on all this. The polls show it. And then later on in the interview, I was defending the position of abolishing ICE. And the host says, well, hold on now, Kyle. You were just talking about how the Americans people are with you according to the polls. Well, on this position of abolishing ICE, the American people are massively against you according to the polls. That's a really good point. That's a really good point. Now, if I'm Ben Shapiro, what do? I can dodge, I can obfuscate, I can turn into Neo from the Matrix and be like, don't answer the question. But no, what did I do? I was honest and upfront and gave a real answer. I said, you know what, you're right about that, but the Democrats have not made the case at all when it comes to abolishing ICE. If the American people knew that we have Customs and Border Protection to already protect the border, and ICE is accused of doing literal slavery at private prisons, I think the American people would then support abolishing ICE. Because the left hasn't made the argument. If we make the argument, then maybe they'll agree. That's it. That's it. You give a real answer to a real question. What does Ben Shapiro do? Anything but that. Anything but that. But yeah, I think you're a leftist. Why aren't you just honest about what you are? Why aren't you just honest? Would you call late-term abortion barbaric? By the way, Andrew Neil had just finished saying, if you were somebody who was, what he was trying to say is, if you were somebody who is pro-abortion, he would be asking an adversarial question from an anti-abortion perspective. But Ben Shapiro brings that up as if it's a gotcha, like, oh yeah, if it was somebody else in this chair, would you ask a tough question on late-term abortion? Yeah, he just said he would do exactly that, and I have no question in my mind he'd do that. Like, oh God, it was just the entitlement you see from Ben Shapiro. He reeks of entitlement throughout this entire interview. And then he had nowhere to go when he was posed with an even harder hitting question of, you called Obama's 2012 State of the Union fascist? Defend that. Why would you call it fascist? And Ben Shapiro's answer is effectively, no good answer on that front. Again, you have the floor, dude. You can make whatever argument you want. Fuck, I can make an argument for something along those lines. You know what a fascist move is? A fascist move is to have no official procedure in place, no due process, and Barack Obama gets to push a button and blow up innocent brown women and babies in Yemen without thinking twice about it, without any oversight whatsoever, without any approval from Congress. That seems pretty fascist to me. I can make an argument for certain things Obama does being fascist, but Ben Shapiro fucking crumbled because he's being asked adversarial questions for the first goddamn time in his life. Andrew Neil brought up, well, you said that Jews who support Obama are Jews in name only. Whoa, what the fuck? Ben Shapiro, this is the guy who goes around accusing everybody else. You're an anti-Semite, you're an anti-Semite, you're an anti-Semite, you're an anti-Semite. And then he literally has quotes where he says stuff like, you know, there are a lot of bad Jews running around here pretending to be Jews. And there's a lot of Jews in name only. Any Jew who supports Obama is a Jew in name only. So, in other words, unless they agree with your exact fundamentalist interpretation of your religion, then they don't count and they're not part of your religion. Dude, that is exactly what the Muslim fundamentalists say. Oh, Shia? They don't count because they don't believe in the real Islam of Sunni Islam, of Wahhabi Islam, of fundamentalist Salafist Islam. So they don't count because they're Shia. He's doing the same shit on the side of Judaism. If you don't believe in my exact interpretation of it, then you don't believe in it at all, and you can't even call yourself a Jew. Jesus Christ. Again, he can't defend it, so he melts down. Then he gets to the tweet, which to his credit, he has written an article saying this was one of the dumber things I said. He has a list of all the dumb things he said, but he still melts down. Like, dude, all you have to do is bring up, like you said, hey, I wrote an article saying here's all the dumb stuff I said. This was on the list. His tweet where he says Israelis like to build, Arabs like to bomb crap and live in sewage or something like that. But see, the problem was, and this is when he really lost it, Andrew Neil called him out on his bullshit, and he said, wait a second. You just said what you meant was Hamas. In the next tweet, you bring up Palestinians, not Hamas. So you say, no, it's not that all Arabs like to live in sewage. It's that Palestinians like to live in sewage. No, see, Ben, that is hilariously stupid. That is beyond stupid. And so now Andrew Neil is there to call you out when you try your dodge and you lie and you say, I just meant Hamas. Well, then why did you say Palestinians? And then he goes, oh, well, according to the polls, they support Hamas, so therefore they're Hamas enough, so I don't know, guilty enough, so yeah. He was exposed for having ugly and silly beliefs. That's what he has. And so he melted down. And again, the final question where he left, I just don't think he had any response to it at all, which is why he really said, that's enough, I'm leaving. The question was, you say we're turning our back on Judeo-Christian values. What are those values? And how are we turning our backs on them? Oftentimes, basic adversarial questions to these kinds of characters, and they'll melt. You know, we're making fun of Ben Shapiro. You think Rafe Dubin would have done any better in that chair? No, Rafe Dubin would have done worse sitting in that chair. A lot of these guys are charlatans, man. Under the slightest bit of scrutiny, they break down. As expected when you really don't believe in anything. So, again, final point. His whole thing is, me, I care about the battle of ideas, bro. I'm all about this exchange of ideas. And then you're presented with an opportunity to have that exchange. To talk with somebody who's asking you tough questions. Which should be your fucking wheelhouse, right? That's what you act like, you know, how to debate and destroy liberals. Yeah. Like, my whole thing is I can take on anybody. And then you fucking melted down under the slightest bit of scrutiny from a conservative. The emperor has no clothes. And I think now it's pretty obvious.